What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex, and in this video, I want to talk about Crimson Desert yet again. And I guess there was actually a wave of press previews that came out over the last 24 hours or so. So I saw this from Push Square. They kind of summed up 4 different outlets. I want to kind of talk more about, because I read each of them individually, see if they had any kind of standout things they wanted to say on Crimson Desert. Now, the title of the Push Square article got me a little concerned because it says, Roundup, new Crimson Desert previews raise concerns over open world RPG's intense combat. And I think I feel like it's a little misleading. I will say, reading through the 4 of these sites, Eurogamer, we can actually just go in order, okay? Eurogamer definitely was the most critical. Now, I'm not saying all of these said, perfect things about the game, but Eurogamer went very, very heavy into mainly the camera. They talked about kind of the difficulty. They likened it. They talked about how they believe maybe it's trying to go for a FromSoft thing when really it's more of a hack and slash thing. Now, in the other previews, they've also talked about the same kind of just topic, and they all kind of brought up the hack and slash thing. They didn't compare it to FromSoft. They didn't think it was trying to do FromSoft, but they did say that it's very much, it feels like, whether it's the camera positioning or just kind of the energy, right? Because you're constantly wanting to attack, and that's a big part of the game. So that does come off more of like a hack and slash game than a FromSoft game. But in terms of, again, the overall Push Square title, I was like, oh my dear God, is this game going to be a giant mess? Eurogamer was definitely the one that was the most critical. The other 3 were definitely not as. Now, they all do kind of say that the combat needs to be tweaked at least a little, but the focus of, okay, well, this is like a serious problem was not there. In fact, I believe the gamer specifically talked about it in a pretty glowing way, that the combat is really good. But I want to talk about one thing in particular that Eurogamer said that I actually think the other outlets seemingly disagreed with. I mentioned the camera. So the camera positioning and the way that you lock on and the way that everything kind of moves, enemies almost attacking you from off screen. These are a lot of the things that Eurogamer said. Now, what's ironic is some of the later ones actually said that this game is a giant step up, or this time they played the game is a giant step up from the time they played it about a year ago. It seems like these people were able to play the game at least one other time, and some of the bosses, I think 2 or 3 of the bosses they were able to face right now were actually the same bosses they faced a year ago, but they were improved. They were better. Again, I think specifically the gamer actually talked about that the camera work is far better than it once was. So I don't know if that means the camera is good or the camera is just slightly better. It was like terrible back then and it's slightly less terrible now. But I don't know, that stuff did not pop up as much. And again, I'm really focusing on it because that title of raising concerns, it seems like this game is not going to be a perfect game, okay, which I don't think is going to shock you. What I think is tough about this overall preview, right, and they all say it, okay, so I do want to kind of put some respect into that and acknowledge it. They were only able to basically do like a boss gauntlet. And to be fair to, I guess, them, and not maybe even necessarily the game or the way that they're trying to show off the game, it really feels like this is the only way that they've done it so far. So a year ago, they did like a boss gauntlet. Now they did and they faced, again, many of the same bosses. I think they faced one new boss now. Now, they all said visually impressive, like really, really cool. The new boss, as opposed to the ones they had already played before, new boss, super, super cool. She's like a witch type thing. She can summon like skeletons, all that jazz. But they've only ever done that. They weren't really given, I think they got to see a presentation in the beginning, and then they got like maybe 5 or so minutes at the end, but they were never able, I think at any point so far, to actually explore the open world. This is going to be like a big game, and bosses are definitely a big part of it, right? Like there's going to be dozens upon dozens of seemingly really, really cool boss fights, and that's a main feature of Crimson Desert, but there's other stuff to do, and we've only really seen it through the developers, and at the same time, actually one of the main highlights that the developers have shown us is the bosses. So I will say, I wouldn't actually say raising concerns over the combat. I feel like we've seen the combat. I feel like the biggest thing we learned about in these previews is if you expected a FromSoft thing, or maybe let me re-say it, because this is kind of how they said it. This is a difficult game, but it's not a FromSoft difficult game. And then it's more of a hack and slash game than anything. So there's your main takeaway. I mean, honestly, I think it's kind of up to us to, judge the game when it eventually comes out. But that's my biggest takeaway in terms of the gameplay, is that it's hack and slash. Okay, check. It plays more like a hack and slash game, and it's going to be difficult. Now, yes, there were complaints of like the lock on. There were complaints of the camera, and it varied from article to article. I mean, I feel like we're just going to have to kind of wait. I mean, the game probably has another 4 or 5 months before it comes out. Maybe they can fix it. Maybe they can't. Maybe it's just a personal problem with like 1 or 2 of these people, and it's not a problem with the other ones. That's something that's going to have to be kind of ironed out later. The biggest thing I would say, if we're raising concerns over anything, is why haven't we really been able to have these outlets and these people that were able to play it early? Why haven't we never been able to give them access to like the rest of the game? Boss fights are big. Boss fights are a main feature, but boss fights are probably going to be like 5% of this game, right? Maybe 10. Let's throw them a bone. But like the rest of it is going to be a lot of open world side activities, main activities, the story, the locations, traversal, going from point A to point B. They've never really been able to do that, and we've never really seen it all that much. So like that's something, to me, that would be my concern. And it's not, it's something that can easily be remedied. They just have to show it to us. But that's something we really have not been able to see, and they're purposely not letting these people, get into those segments. So we'll see if we get any of that stuff, I guess, before the game comes out. But let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.